Hi everyone, this is Future Rail Productions here, and this is my first review of a model train, and today we have the Lionel LionChief Plus 282 Mikado Southern Railway 4501. Before I give you the stats and facts about this engine, I want to tell you guys about the real 282 Mikado. Now you're probably wondering what a 282 Mikado is. Well, it refers to the wheel arrangement. You have 2 lead wheels underneath the pilot, 8 drive wheels, and 2 wheels underneath the firebox for support. So, back during World War II, these were known as MacArthurs. The reason why they were known as Mikados is because there was a group of locomotives specifically built for the Nippon, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, I'm probably butchering it, but of Japan, and this was built to 3-foot gauge if I remember correctly. So, when these engines were built, the Japanese referred to them as Mikados, and the name stuck. However, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941, nobody wanted having a 282 Mikado sounding, well, like a Mikado because it was a Japanese name. So during the duration of the war, and sometime after, they were referred to as MacArthurs. So after World War II ended, the name MacArthur was dropped, and the name Mikado returned. And that's why today we know them as Mikados, not MacArthurs. Now that's out of the way, I'm going to give you some facts about the real Southern Railway 4501. Southern Railway 4501 was built in 1911 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works as their 37,085th locomotive. It was the first of 185 sisters. It was retired in 1948 and then was rescued by a guy who owned this railroad called the Kentucky and Tennessee Railroad. It was a coal hauling short line that was up into the Kentucky, Appalachian Mountains area. And then in 1963 she was retired, but was rescued by a man by the name of Paul Merriman and was put into use as a excursion locomotive. And it's actually still in use today at the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum. Now that you know the history of the Mikado and the history of the 4501, let's talk about this model. This model can be run 2 different ways. It can be run conventionally with just a transformer and some track, or with the Lionel LionChief Plus remote. As you can see, it's nicely detailed. Has a well, the control for the throttle is actually designed like a steam locomotive wheel. Pretty cool. In the cab we have 3 different switches for 3 different settings on the engine. I'm going to show you those now. Here you can see the 3 different switches in the cab. On the right you have the switch for the chugging sounds, which turns the synchronized chuffing off. In the center you have the transformer remote to turn it between conventional mode or remote mode. And on the left you have your smoke control. One other thing I forgot to mention is that when the engine is on and running, there is a flicker in the firebox simulating coal being burned. The front of the engine is nicely detailed. It has a nice designed cast-in cowcatcher as well as a cast-in coupler head. It does not operate. Some nice cast-in steps, as well as some separately applied handrails to go up on the catwalk, as well as a separately applied handrail that runs up the side of the smoke box. And then on the front we have an operating headlight as well as some crisp number boards on both sides and some marker lights. Now the marker lights do not operate, they are just green gems. As we go down the engine you can see that there's the drive gear, and the drive gear looks amazing when the engine is in operation. Something else I've noticed is that the engine has legible builder's plates, and the bottom builder's plate reads 37,085th. That's a really interesting touch, and it's kind of awesome because the engine in real life is the 37,085th locomotive product of the Baldwin Locomotive Works. So Lionel was pretty awesome in adding that little detail. Farther back on the engine we can see more cast-in detail as well as that separately applied handrail running all the way back to the cab. Moving back to the cab we can see that there's some really nice rivet detail on the firebox, as well as a hand-painted engineer in the engineer's seat, as well as some crisp red windows and a crisp Southern 4501. And it's the same on the other side. Up on top we have the fan-driven smoke unit, and to load smoke fluid into the smoke unit you simply pour smoke fluid down the stack. Moving on back from the smokestack, we can see the sand dome, and it has a crisp 4501 on it. Beyond that, we have the swinging bell, which swings back and forth like that. Beyond the bell, we have the whistle, 3 pop-off valves, and the steam dome, as well as the dynamo. Now that we've done the engine, let's review the tender. Here on the tender, you can see some of the cast-in detail work, as well as some separately applied handrails for climbing up into the cab. And then below that, we have some nice cast-in steps. Now, of course, this is not going to be hugely detailed, as this is a entry-level kit and not a high-end legacy engine. But there is a lot of detail to be seen. Farther back, we have a crisp 4501, as well as some nice rivet detail on the tender. On top of the tender, we have an all-steel coal load, and we have a little detailed water hatch back here, and the hatch does not open. On the back of the tender, we have a nice crisp 4501, as well as a cast-in ladder and some nice separately applied handrails. And below that, we have a cast-in ladder on both sides, as well as the ElectroCoupler that can be fired from the LionChief remote. Kind of an interesting feature on these LionChief steam engines is these little sockets here. These are the new drawbar systems specifically for these kinds of steam locomotives. Now, these drawbar systems are very interesting because they're basically idiot-proof. You can't break them unless you break them, if you actually go out and try to break them. There are little contact tabs inside the receiving end of the tender drawbar system here, as well as on the drawbar of the engine. And simply put, you basically take the tender and with the engine, and you bring the two together and connect them in like that, and then with a screwdriver or your finger you come in and push lightly on the head of the coupler, and it goes into the receiving end like this. Like that. Pretty simple. And you know how many problems I've had with this so far? None. Okay, before we get the engine started up and running, I want to mention my favorite feature of this engine. You know, there's a lot of features on this engine, like, you know, casting detail, the LionChief remote, but my favorite detail is the legible builder's plate on the engine that says 37,085th locomotive of Baldwin Locomotive Works. Anyways, let's start this engine up. Okay, so the track power is plugged in, but we don't have power to the track yet. I'll have to turn on the throttle first. Now, take note of what happens when the transformer is powered on. The engine is starting to beep. Now, the engine is beeping for probably a multitude of reasons, but the most common one is that the remote is not turned on. So this is what happens when you turn on the remote. The engine starts up. Okay, let's try the whistle. Alright, that works wonderfully. Let's try the bell. Here's some of the crew talk.
Kind of hold our schedule. Can I move? Over. Negative. Stand by for track orders. Dispatcher, I got a pull to make schedule. Over. Okay, take degree. Out.
Okay, I got a train hooked up and we're about ready to roll, but before we do, take note of the low speed operation of this engine. It's really cool.
Dispatcher, I got a pull to make schedule. Over. Okay, take degree. Out.
That's it for this review. I hope you enjoyed. This engine is a joy to run. Its features and details are superb. It feels definitely like an entry-level legacy engine. Anyways, if you're interested in getting one of these, the retail price is $429, but if you go through a good Lionel dealer, you're bound to get a discount. Anyways, that's it for now. I'm Future Rail Productions, and I'll see you next time.